Good morning, afternoon, maybe even evening for those viewers, listeners to this third episode of the Business Central ISV podcast. Welcome. And also welcome to my guest, Ger, if I pronounced correctly, Foskin. Been a long time, Ger, that we talked.
Yeah,
I think about 5 years, but very good to
yes,
see you again. I've worked numerous times with you in Ireland, but
yeah.
indeed, let's start with that first question. Who is Ger Foskin and who is SimplyDynamics?
Okay. Well, SimplyDynamics is a Business Central, or what started as a Business Central only partner, or a NAV in the day partner back in the late 2000s, um, servicing the ERP space in Ireland and the UK. And came about from a number of individuals setting up the company who had actually worked with NAV back to the mid 90s, okay, as end users. So I myself was originally an accountant and needed a solution to cover multiple industries, and bought Navision at the time, I think 2.6 or whatever was the version for on-prem for a range of different companies. And through the years, we went down through working with various partners within the partner channel, post working in industry, and eventually in 2007 set up SimplyDynamics with a view to being a specialist in the ERP space. Very early on in that cycle, we actually identified repeatability and also became, for a long time, the only Irish ISV partner. So building repeatable apps. And we also in the early in the cycle made a decision that our apps would be horizontal as opposed to vertical. We're quite a small market, so verticalization before globalization, verticalization of local markets was a big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, we were looking for horizontal fit, optimization, automation tools for Business Central. So we started into that ISV process. And then with the transition to Business Central and the transition to cloud, um, we've maintained that focus, and we have, I think, approximately 18 apps currently released certified up in App Source, and probably another 4 apps on the drawing board at various stages of client testing. So generally, we will release an app into one of our traditional ERP clients, deliver, refine, etc., before we release it to the wider market in App Source. And most of our apps are globally released, so they're for all markets. So that's our journey in terms of as a BC partner. It's evolved into broader than BC. It's now the full Dynamics 365, Microsoft Fabric, all the usual suspects within the suite, and a long-standing tradition in ISV and apps as well, which is it's a very exciting space, and you actually see that from app source. We were at a point where I think when we got our first app certified was maybe 600 apps or 400 apps or something up in app
Mm-hmm.
source. It's now about, I don't know, 4,500, 4,800 or something like that. And I'm astounded by the adoption, and ease of global sale and ease of adoption in terms of people. They realize, like, they're renting an app. Generally, they'll avail of a free trial and then will rent an app with a monthly commitment, and there's a low barrier to entry. And it very much changes, and we'll touch on it as we're going through it, very much changes the focus on how you build, what you build, and what you should be focusing on in terms of ensuring customer adoption, which is the big thing. And it's not just about selling your product, it's about when the product is in place, um, is it adopted? Is it utilized? So I can see, like, being a partner, we sell, and I'm quite impressed with the company called Continia. So we sell their solutions, and I can see for Continia now their focus has moved, to you get quite good communication in terms of usage and adoption, your client usage and adoption, and kind of pointers or KPIs to say where adoption is not maybe as expected. So that's something now that we basically look at in terms of telemetry on our apps, in terms of saying, well, hang on, a user has this, but they're not using 4 or 5 of the features we think they should be using. We're not seeing the telemetry on it. We're not seeing the results. Are they aware it's there in terms of value for money on the application? Did they know they could do this and this, which we would expect them to be doing within their business? And you have much more, there is a little bit more of a distance from these global customers that are adopting the apps, because you don't quite understand their business or their business model or how their business central has been deployed. But at the same time, the telemetry, there is a lot of stuff that's universal in terms of what a lot of customers, where there is a gap fit or there is an automation, or an atypical client profile, what they're likely to be doing or utilizing within the system. So that kind of telemetry and assisting users in terms of increasing adoption um, for an app, that's a big thing, and I can see that coming more and more within the distribution channel. And one of the other things I think we realized as well within the app space is we don't need to be all things to all people. We don't need to have an app for everything. There are best of breed apps there that really we should be adopting, not reinventing. So we focus on what we think we do well. But it's quite a broad footprint, as at 18 horizontal apps is not insignificant in terms
I
of
agree.
delivery, but they're all specific feature sets and gap fits. And I suppose in most cases, we probably have competing products in the market. And really, from our viewpoint, I suppose we just feel, look, how do we differentiate ourselves? So, so one of the items I think in terms of the podcast, or in terms of the requirement, is, look, what has a partner learned? What's changed in the market?
Mm,
Where's your focus changed? And for us, I can give you a specific example. We have an app which is called SD Case Manager, and effectively it's a ticketing system for dealing with almost like logging support issues, customer complaints, quality non-conformance, a number of areas and issues where you're logging a ticket and or an event, and you are actioning it and progressing it through the system. So what we noticed with that product is it got an unusually high number of inquiries and trial registrations, above a lot of our other products. So it obviously was ticking a box in terms of need, but it got a lower than expected conversion to subscription. Okay. But of all the sites, we've quite a few sites using it, and of the sites using it, we were getting low error logging. So it's obviously stable and it's not problematic. And very few feature requests, not a significant number of feature requests on the system, which basically meant it was feature rich. So we had a stable product that was feature rich, that had a use case that ticked the box, that brought in a lot of inquiries, but low conversion. And as we started to explore that, it was too complicated. It's too complex. That was our issue. UI and even pre-configured setup data to give somebody a concept. And an awful lot of it is aesthetic, even in terms of how you set up your sample data, that it's easy on the eye, that codes flow logically or visually are less confusing, and on setup pages where you have lots of toggle options, boolean yes no on off options, that rather than them being scattered through the setup, clustering them together was visually easier for a user to adopt. And so instead of focusing on its release plan on increasing features, we stopped the feature releases, and we focused on cycles of UI improvement and test data and startup data configuration, cleansing the configuration and giving somebody an easier start point. And we're beginning to see the benefits of that in terms of conversion from trial to adoption. So that's been a big change for us in terms of you always, as a partner, think you get a rush of blood to the head and you think more features, more features. Um, but in a lot of cases, the more features aren't the most important thing.
That's true.
So it's very much about that. So we kind of have adopted a mantra, which is we want a user to be able to adopt and use the application without reading a user guide. Okay, so that's our objective. Uh, Everybody's becoming lazy, and they want it that. Why do I need like I should it? There'll always be maybe deeper features that need a little bit of explaining, but a user should be able to read a field and intuitively understand roughly what that field is for. They shouldn't be like simplifying setup screens and providing them with out of the box, no knowledge of their business, but pre-configured use case data. And then they can go and vary it. Um, so that that focus to or change of direction to focus on UI and increase adoption and improve trial data, setup data, test data. Um, that's been a big change. That's been a bit and relaxing in the cycle, relaxing to say, look, features can be drip fed. There's enough features in it. We're not getting. We'd be very mindful. Like we took on again another product that we like, and we took it on from another partner there recently, and we had to have 6 interactions with the partner in terms of failed installation and setup. And to me, that shouldn't happen. Problems with the installation, installing their app and configuring their app, getting it to a workable status, to have to interact with a partner 6 times. So our objective is we shouldn't have client interaction on trials. They should be able to install the app, deploy a standard setup, um, and use it. We're very open to somebody asking us, can I do this, or is this feature available, or did I miss this? But we should not be getting end user questions saying, look, it's giving me an error message, or it's saying when I press this button, it won't carry out a process. That should all be eliminated. So that's very much part of our focus.
Very good, long but very good introduction, Ger. Thank you for that. But and I think I should have written down all the questions that I have while you were talking, explaining about
Sure.
SimplyDynamics. Now, you mentioned in the beginning, but and I know this is called the Business Central ISV podcast, but I do know, and you mentioned also in the introduction, that you're not just doing Business Central. You're
Yes.
having a much wider span of solution focus. Can you go a little bit deeper on that? Like, what are the other solutions you are focusing on and delivering to the market, integrated with Business Central?
Okay. So there's been a considerable change. So I would have had Nav or Navision at heart, and I would have been holding on to contact management and opportunities and segments within the CRM section of Nav. So that's gone. It's blown out of the water by sales. Yeah. And what used to
Dynamic
be my
sales, dynamic sales, right? Yeah.
Dynamics 365 sales, yeah. Or again, traditionalist, maybe Sales Pro. I find myself referring to it a lot of times, and I'd still call the marketing granule. So most of what we use or sell, we adopt ourselves. So we transitioned ourselves from managing our opportunity and sales and contact management out of BC into Dynamics sales. And then even within our app source or ISV stream, we've deployed customer journeys. Okay,
Okay.
so anyone that registers one of our apps is basically brought into a customer journey with regular touch points. And the decision for an app sale for somebody could be a 6 to 9 month decision because they begin trialing it and investigating, and it goes off the radar. And really, because it's a global market and because we don't have a touch point and our brand basically isn't known, we have to basically just keep brand aware. Okay, so over a 6, 9, 12-month period, we're reinforcing our brand with sporadic every 2 or 3 months a touch point with those contacts that have registered an interest. Um, so we've moved to that ourselves, and we've deployed that ourselves, and we've started like within our customer base, within our core Business Central customer base. Um, that's that's their CRM solution now, with largely integrated then to BC. Yeah, but the sales cycle, the contact management, lead nurture, opportunity nurture through to winning an order will happen in sales and then transition to BC at the order winning stage.
Yeah.
Um, and something similar then with customer service and field service. They're quite high on the radar for us. Um, and then I think when you stuck into that whole mix, you have Power Automate, and basically building apps and flows. And probably the most exciting one for me now, and a very recent transition. So we were at I keep calling it Tech Days, Days of Knowledge in Birmingham there recently. And what's happening with Power BI and Fabric. So it used to be a situation to get your data lake created and your BC data or whatever up into Fabric. You need to have an anorak and 20 years of university training or whatever. Whereas um, mirroring has been introduced very recently, which is a game changer. It's a
Yeah.
game changer for Fabric, and basically Power BI. But equally within the Power BI space, we have adopted some pre-built cubes and dashboards from again an app provider, which, like, when we look at it, we deliver into a customer in 4 hours a full, say, sales cube. And we've said to customers, like, for that €80 app or €100 app or whatever it is, that it would cost us about €30,000 of services to build the equivalent reporting and dashboards that they're getting. Okay. So within the Power BI space and within the Fabric space, you've got some fantastic business analytics pre-canned, but you also now have this mirroring option with Fabric as a repo, which is very exciting. It's very exciting in terms of creating this information pool around BC and around other data sources. In and that's moving on leaps and bounds. So that's going
Yeah.
to become quite a significant for all partners. It's going to become quite a significant revenue stream and service delivery focus, I think, because there isn't anything to compete with it out there.
Yeah.
It blows everything else out of the water. So, and I think, like a lot of partners, the reality is we've kind of been dragged in that direction. Yeah. Um, it's momentum in the market that's brought us that we're, as opposed to being firebrands and saying, wow, now maybe within the Fabric space, I'm sold on, I'm seeing where it's going, and a bit of a, maybe a little bit of a firebrand. But in terms of the general cloud adoption, ease of cloud, definitely we were a follower as opposed to a firebrand. Remain to be convinced. But everything we're seeing in terms of market trends, in terms of barriers to entry for people to buy into the system at both the core BC or D365 app level because of the SaaS, that's gone. Fear of losing control of their data because it's up in the cloud, that's
Yeah.
gone. Um, Thinking differently about customization and instead adopting an app. Customization traditionally was a dirty word, but everybody felt that they needed somebody to knit them a jumper, yeah, knit them something specifically to fit them. But there's such a pool of apps out there now. The first port of call is generally to review app source and say, hang on, there's a couple of apps here as options. As a partner, I want to talk to you. Which one do you think we should go with? So that's very much changed, and we're very open to that. We're very open to taking on apps. And generally, because there are multiple options, we'll settle on one and we'll guide an end user and say, look, this is our preferred recommended app in that space, but these are the options available to
Yeah.
you.
Now, when you were just doing Business Central or NAV, Navision,
Hmm.
you kept awake at night to think about like, hey, what are all the challenges from a Business Central perspective today? You mentioned sales, you mentioned field service, customer
Yeah,
service, Power Automate, Power Apps, Fabric. So I think well, I believe there are many things that keep you awake at night during the day, of course, Ger. But what I hear a lot is like, how do you decide where to innovate and how to innovate? Because there's like, well, you have this breadth of solutions that you're
yeah.
managing, selling to your customers. Microsoft is pushing innovations every 6 months. Well, innovation.
Every 15 minutes, I'd say. There's something coming at you every 15 minutes.
Then
So
there is this co-pilot focus, which is
mhm,
really going into every application we see, Business Central, field service, and so on. So how do you manage that? Also internally to keep your team focused while also innovating on these different apps.
okay. So there's an element of, so the first thing is our staff, which is, it's left reasonably open. We put out some knowledge signposts, if you like. Our staff basically have an allocation of time, recurring time, which is non-billable, non-customer centric, which is learning curve time, which is really important, because you need them to be, well, first of all, cutting edge, and secondly, engaged, excited about what they're doing. So that's discretionary. We don't kind of corral them into, so we'll put up a menu of what we think is topical, and they'll allocate time in terms of what ticks their box. So everybody's excited by Copilot, and everybody wants to become a Copilot expert, and all that sort of stuff. But
Great.
there is a blend in the business analytics space towards Fabric and etc. And they become, quite often they'll become, we're probably like, we're a commercial business, so we're led by customer demand as well. And in terms of innovations, we'll adopt innovations that in some cases will fail. The customer adoption will be poor, but you will see quite quickly. So, for example, the pre-canned Power BI cubes can take a little bit of, like, a free trial, a little bit of a convincing for a customer to move to Power BI for the reporting solution if they're not already on it. But once they have it in place for a month, they're convinced. The wealth of information. So that gets led by customer demand and adoption, and to some extent then staff are delivering and driven into learning, through customer project and customer delivery. Probably less often I'll see something that I'll kind of say, hang on, this is where it's going. And for me, fabric is, this is where it's going. The fabric and mirroring. So that takes maybe a little bit more. I have to sell it to the staff to say, hang on, let's get ahead of the curve on this. This is significant. This will mean something to customers, and equally balance it out that this will both mean something to customers and be commercial. Um, so, I'd say the biggest factor then is probably customer driven. Most of our customers are very sophisticated in terms of knowing what's in the market, and knowing what they want, and knowing what works for them. So it could be, eh, if you look at data lakes and fabric, and as it was before, and before mirroring, I said it was one of these anorak solutions. It was too complicated. So
Mm-hmm.
adoption, SME adoption anyway, or SMB adoption, where you didn't have an IT team that was immersed in that sort of stuff, it was an impediment. Whereas now those impediments are being removed at a reasonably rapid pace, and the first one is probably the fabric mirroring. So for Business Central as a repo up there, in Fabric, it's clicks and hours as opposed to days and weeks in terms of getting
Mm-hmm.
it in place. So as I said, look, there's so many bright, shiny objects out there, and there are so many app distributors knocking on the door, and look at mine, and look at this. And in reality, it is probably, a lot of it is customer led. That's probably a bigger influence. What's being accepted, what works, what's adopted, what gets positive feedback. Um, and then you row in behind that. That's a lot. As I said, it is no joke that sometimes it does feel like every 15 minutes there's an innovation. There's Now it's really positive. It's all going in a great direction, but it is hard to keep pace. It's hard to keep pace with the change. But
But,
anyway, that's the exciting part of it.
but what I'm also hearing, Ger, around innovation, it seems to be part of your culture to focus on that innovation. You're mentioning Fabric, you're mentioning Power Automate, you're mentioning the CRM. I'm saying that because I believe it's quite unique to have a original Business Central partner that's expanding into other solution areas, which are in the end providing value to your end customers.
Yeah.
And having that, what you mentioned, your team has time available to focus on learning, trying, failing, if I can, but failing
Yeah,
is also
yeah, yeah,
learning.
yeah.
So it's
Failing
part,
is
it
hugely
seems to be
important. Yeah,
it's part of your culture.
yeah. It is, yeah. So look, there's an element of the global BC or Dynamics pool is a competitive space. That there's huge demand. It's been hugely successful in terms of market share expansion. Um, so e- Jobs recruitment and retention
Mm-hmm.
is not just about salary. And it's almost, it's not about having beanbags and foosball tables in the office,
Mm-hmm.
because home working has become huge, remote working has become huge. So it's about introducing a kick into the week, into, the working week for staff as well, and giving them discretion in terms of what they want to learn and reinforce and apply, and constantly having something new to learn, and ideally where they're not learning that with the backdrop of being under pressure for delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a forced learning in terms of saying, okay, I've got this project and I've got this requirement and now I've got to get myself up to speed. So instead, you're giving them a menu of items saying, look, what floats your boat? What do you get a kick out of? Um, what's kind of interesting for me is the sharing then post learning, kind of the excitement. I like to see that from the staff. So as there's some knowledge sharing going on, and somebody saying, God, you didn't realize we could do this and you could do that. And then they start applying
Nice.
use case.
Yeah.
Yeah, they start applying use case to end users and saying, Jesus, I need to tell this customer that this feature is available, or we could be doing this, or they should be thinking about this. And you know, that's reassuring. That's like when, I suppose, your child goes off out into the world and, makes their way themselves or whatever. You're kind of saying, yeah,
Yeah.
job well done. And you're seeing that with staff in terms of saying, look, geez, they're getting a kick out of that, and that's exciting. That's very gratifying. And it is like there's a world, there's a world of options and features and things to be looked at, and innovation, and bringing innovation to a customer is very gratifying. When it works well. No, it doesn't work well every time.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's a kind of very fulfilling.
Yeah.
Very fulfilling. So that's interesting.
Great. Thank you for that. We're almost at the end,
Yeah.
Ger.
Yeah.
Time is flying.
Sure.
My last question. Well, it might be a follow up based on your answer.
Hmm.
But if there would be, well, you're a long time person working with Microsoft. Microsoft's quite good. Sometimes it's very challenging to work with Microsoft. We are a complex organization, or we might be a complex organization. Now, if there would be one thing that you would or could ask to Microsoft from a roadblock perspective, to do more business, from a dynamics perspective, that could be helpful not only for Simply Dynamics, but also for
Hmm.
other partners, other ISVs, other system integrators, what would be that one ask that would help the Dynamics community? What would that be?
Well, I think for me, there's lots of wish list items in terms of, but what I'm seeing, say, within the dynamics, I couldn't ask any more in terms of innovation. It is fantastic, and it is, there's features introduced, not all of them succeed, but the wealth of features is phenomenal, and we have stability. We have an unprecedented positive story in terms of what we're competing with in the market. So I'm okay in that space. Um, App Source has been a phenomenal success in terms of volume of apps been introduced. But what I do find is it's very hard to find or filter down in App Source a solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
So from a UI perspective, you're walking into this mega store. Yeah. And there's options on shelves all over the place. So if you walked into a supermarket and the beans were beside the milk and you didn't know where the bread was and you weren't able to find the bread and there's no signposts, AppSource unfortunately is a little bit like that. You have to persevere to find, and it shouldn't be like that. So filtering down solutions in AppSource to say, look, is it available in my region? Does it offer a free trial? Even the commercials aren't published, probably for good reason. You have to go somewhere else to find the commercials. How much does it cost? Is it in my price space? And I'm looking to address a specific problem. And when I search, so the text searching in terms of finding something to address, or what are the solutions to deal with uh, monitoring quality control issues or something like that. It's not intuitive. Yeah. So that improvement in app source in terms of finding solutions
Mm-hmm.
uh, from an end user viewpoint. So we put all the text in, we put all the use case scenarios, et cetera. And so there's a lot of stuff in there that's almost not SEO optimized or searchability optimized. So users struggle to find it. So that's probably my primary or my first thing in terms of look servicing the app market. Let people know, let people almost there's such a wealth of stuff in there when they have an issue, when they have a blocker, when they need a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's options in there. It's just a little bit of a challenge to find those options. That's
Yeah.
probably an improvement in the searchability of app source.
Searchability, transactability.
Transactability isn't introduced there. So as a partner, we've had to commercialize ourselves. So we've gotten over that hump in terms of license key control and direct debit, and like we've had to make certain decisions in terms of commercially how we service the market. So really we'll only service DD direct debit customers
Yeah.
only. Really we made a decision which was painful for me because I'm nostalgic. We've dropped from our app radar on-prem BC clients and legacy BC clients. So really we're saying, look, our apps are now focused at cloud current version. Yeah. So I'm okay with the commercialization. We've gone through that learning curve and path, and it wasn't easy, but
Mm-hmm.
for scalability and all that, it's had to be slick, and it is slick. So that's slick on our end. Um, but a customer, the first thing is like the pricing is not within all the sections you complete as you're publishing an app to app source. You are not steered or obliged or anything to publish pricing. So you're generally supporting the app source
Yeah.
page with your own product page to
Yeah.
convey that information. So that's one of the early stage questions you'll get from somebody. But again, in a lot of cases, we're feeding that link and finding that information. We're enabling the end user to obtain that once the free trial is installed. There's no credit card details, there's no commitment to anything. They basically go and do a free trial and they can feed themselves from there.
Yeah.
But finding the solution, indicating a need and finding appropriate solutions, or key text searching within app source. But again, like app source has ballooned. It has ballooned over the last 24 months in terms of volume of apps. So that's why it's a good thing. It's becoming challenging because the number of solutions. But I think we need to keep pace with providing a shop front UI
Yeah.
on it for end users.
Great.
Okay.
We're, well, more than great, Ger. We're at the end of our podcast. Half an hour flies, I think even
Yeah.
35 minutes. I think very great feedback, insights that you've shared. I'm sure we could have a second session, and we might have a second session because we didn't discuss really about scalability.
Yes.
But maybe next session in
Sure.
2025 would be very
Yep.
great.
Yep.
But thank you very much for your time,
Lovely
Jerry.
stuff, and it was good to talk to you again,
Yeah,
Ingmar. And we hopefully will see you in Dublin sometime soon.
very soon. Thank you very much,
All
Jerry.
right.
Talk
Okay.
later.
Good to talk
Bye.
to you. Take care. Bye. 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 Bye.